What's up, everybody? It's Travis here. Yes, you see the cowboy hat and you see the new background. That is because we are in the heart of Nashville, kind of. We're on a New Year's Eve trip, but we're still finding time to record, so if that doesn't sound like a good reason to subscribe, then I don't know what does. But today we have the biggest news available right now, as we're in a 1 month period with no UFC fights going into 2025. Somehow, the biggest news piece in fight news right now is Conor McGregor in 2025. And so we have a report of him facing Logan Paul in India. And there's a reported billionaire putting on this whole event. And Conor McGregor has had to walk away with $250 million, which is one of the most financially rewarding fights in fighting history. That is, to walk away with $250 million after a fight is insane money. But they're scheduled to go to India to visit India tourism campaign for their upcoming fight. And there's been a lot of talks about this lately, but it actually seems like it could have some validity to it. Chael Sonnen doesn't seem to think so, but, we'll see what happens. But so as far as this fight goes, if we look at their age, Conor McGregor is 36 years old, will likely be 37 at the time of their fight. Logan Paul is 29 years old, will be 30 at the time of their fight. So it's someone in the prime of their athletic career versus someone maybe 3 years removed from the prime of his athletic career. So, and not to mention that injury came off of. Shouldn't be as big of a deal as boxing as it would be in MMA, but it's still noteworthy nonetheless. We go their height, which is something that matters a lot in boxing, height and reach. We have Conor McGregor's height at 5'9", and his reach at 74 inches. We have Logan Paul's height at 6'2", which is 5 inches bigger than Conor McGregor. That is a very, very noticeable difference in height, especially when it comes to boxing. And we have Logan Paul's reach at, see if this has it here, reach at 76 inches, so I believe that's only 2 inches longer than Conor McGregor, so still a difference, but not as drastic as the height. But if you're punching up, especially 5 inches up, it's like a half foot, it's going to be a lot harder than someone punching down or punching level at you, right? So that's the fight. Who do I think will win the boxing match? I don't know. They both fought Floyd Mayweather. Conor's fight was decent against Mayweather. Like, he didn't look horrendous. People are like, oh, Logan beat Mayweather. Not many people really say that, but Logan Paul says that. But there are times in the fight he's telling Mayweather to chill, and like it just wasn't a real fight. It was not as competitive of a fight as Mayweather versus McGregor. So I still think Conor McGregor is the better boxer and better athlete as a total, so he should have the advantage. However, Paul's been active, been focused on his career and everything, training, everything the past couple of years. And Conor McGregor, well, we know what Conor McGregor's been up to, and it's about everything except fighting, whether that be boxing, mixed martial arts, or anything. It's just antic after antic, baloney after baloney, It's just a whole bunch of nonsense going on. But I don't know who wins the fight. I honestly think Paul could win it because he's more focused, but who knows? Maybe if Conor locks in, he should be able to get the job done because he is the superior combat athlete by far. But I don't know. It's kind of like the Jake Paul thing, fighting older fighters who are washed and not actively training while he's training every day. That's kind of what this is. Like, we know who the better combat athlete is, but given their current states, we don't know. But since this is an MMA and UFC channel, not a boxing channel, we're going to talk about the MMA and UFC implications of this fight and if it were to go down. And since Logan Paul does not fight in the UFC, even though he has teased it, we will talk about Conor McGregor's career implications if this fight happens. So whether he wins or loses and he comes back to the UFC, he'll still be a big star, big draw. He's the biggest star in MMA history, so that's not going to change. But if you lose to Logan Paul and you're coming back, that does ruin your hype, which is already being ruined. The fight he's supposed to come back to is against Michael Chandler, because they were both coaches for The Ultimate Fighter, season 31. But that fight was supposed to happen almost a year and a half ago at this point, and it still hasn't happened, and Chandler just fought somebody else. Which brings me to my next point. Chandler lost his last fight against Charles Oliveira. If he were to beat Charles Oliveira, McGregor comes back and they fight, then it's like a serious conversation of whoever wins that fight could have a shot at Islam Makhachev or whoever the lightweight champion is, and have a fight for the belt because they just beat Charles Oliveira before that. But with him losing to Charles Oliveira, it ruins the hype a little bit more because you know that Chandler is not at that level of Charles. Even though he looked decent in the fight, you know he's not at that level. So you know that the winner of this fight still, you don't know if they're at Charles' level, who's not at Makhachev's level, which is the champion level, right? Unfortunate as it is. To my next point, Conor McGregor will be coming back at 37 or 38 years old in the octagon, and he keeps calling this the greatest report or the greatest return in combat sports history, but I don't know of a greatest return that would happen at age 38, like your Stipe Miocic age right here, and we saw how that turned out. We see how it turns out for every old fighter. Look at what Tony Ferguson's doing, right? So this is nonsense in my opinion. Conor's last fights, he is 1-3. His last win will have been 5 or 6 years ago at the time of his next UFC fight, and that was against Donald Cowboy Cerrone with a first round knockout. That was that very goofy one with the shoulder to the nose. Like, that was a lucky win, and it was against the Cerrone who was coming at the end of his career. So a win is a win, but I'm not gonna sit here and act like it's the most impressive win I've ever seen. And then with back-to-back losses to Dustin Poirer after that, and then before that a loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov. All good opponents, but 1-3 in your last 4 fights. And then that was in 2021. You're going to take 4 or 5 years off and then try to come back and make the greatest return ever in your upper 30s is not something that sounds feasible, not something that sounds real, like it's going to happen, right? There have been talks about him coming back to other people like Dan Hooker, Charles Oliveira. I mean, you got everyone in the UFC calling him out whenever they get a win. It's kind of annoying, like Ilia Topuria and Sean O'Malley. Like, this guy shouldn't come back and you're going to waste your call out on him, but whatever, right? None of those guys would lose to Conor McGregor right now. Every one of them trains every day, is focused on their career, while Conor McGregor for the past however many years, we'll call it 7, 8 years, has not been focused on his career, right? Since that Floyd Mayweather fight, which was in 2017 or 2018, he's not been focused on his career. His career record will tell you after the fact with these 3 losses and 1 goofy win. And then every antic he's pulled outside of it, he's just nowhere near locked in and able to compete at the highest level of the UFC. And I think what needs to happen is Conor McGregor needs to announce that he's not coming back to the UFC and accept it rather than teasing the organization, teasing the fans year after year. This has happened every year since 2021. He says he's going to keep fighting. He puts out Netflix documentaries, says it all the time, and it just never happens. We get further and further away from him making a return as we've ever been before. Like, right now, I think we're even further after all the trial stuff coming about, after all these party instances and all these substances he's been on, every antic he's pulled. This doesn't sound like someone who's making a return to the UFC octagon, especially after that injury, right? The closest we got was to him fighting Chandler, and that it just fell apart, and it really doesn't feel like it's going to happen. Because now there's talks of Chandler fighting Paddy Pimblett. You can see my last video for more details on that. But if Chandler loses to Paddy Pimblett, there is zero hype for a Chandler versus McGregor fight. Because if Conor McGregor goes out there and loses to someone who lost to Paddy Pimblett and Oliveira, it's like why is this guy even coming back to fight? Like, he's just not competing anywhere in the top 10 in his division. And if he beats Chandler after a loss to Paddy, then it's like, okay, but you still don't even know if you're at Paddy's level because Paddy just beat him too, and Charles beat him as well. So you have a lot higher to climb in your early 40s or late 30s to get to the title, where it just doesn't seem possible, and there's no need to come back. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't need anything. It's pretty pointless in my opinion, but to each their own. There is just no active UFC fighter now with any relevance to their name who's a big fighter that Conor McGregor would beat reasonably. You can argue me on this point, but there is genuinely nobody out there for him. Now, the only relevant fight for Conor McGregor to come back, there was once a rumor that there will be a 165-pound division, because if you know the UFC divisions, it goes 125, 35, 45, 55, but then instead of going to 165 pounds, it goes to 170, and then it goes back to 185, and then 205 to 225, I believe, for light heavyweight and heavyweight. they're like, maybe they've been talking about making a 165 division for a while and pushing 170 to 175, so you have an even distribution amongst your weight classes. But if he comes back and fights Chandler for that belt, like it was rumored at one point, even though these have mostly been shut down, and he wins that belt, the people who are going to be competing in 165 are people from 170 that are stuck at 170 or too small, or people who are too big for 155 or stuck at 155. So you might see people like Gaethje or Dan Hooker or Colby Covington or a number of people. None of these people, except maybe Colby, but none of these real name people Conor McGregor would stand any chance against, because these people, again, are locked in their careers. If you have been fighting year after year, the past 5 years, like Conor McGregor has not been doing, and you're locked in on your career, you can't have Conor McGregor, as good as he was. He was good. He wasn't one of the GOATs, but he was good. You're not going to come back in after not training, that injury, everything going on in your personal life, and expect to beat these guys. It's not possible. At that level, at the top of the top, it's not going to happen. Nothing you can say can convince me of that. So even if you were to face Chandler for a 165 belt, which every fan and anyone watching the sport would know that it's just Dana White privilege. They're just giving him that because he's popular. And he wins that belt and he's champion once again. He would immediately lose that belt to the first number one contender that there is. It'd be someone like a Dan Hooker, a Beneil Dariush. I don't know if Dustin Poirer does it because he's talking about just one last fight. But it's guys like these who are good that still want to compete for titles. Like Conor McGregor, as I've mentioned, will have no chance against. So what needs to happen is Conor McGregor needs to announce his retirement and accept the fact that he's not going back to the UFC and quit teasing it every other week, because it's just ridiculous at this point. He's anything but locked in, and the return is not going to happen. But with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.